Well, we don't want to keep Charles forever, but we do have. So we'll maybe lightning round this here to go. We're not going to hit on all these kids, but those are your 5 stars. A lot more guys in your top 300, Charles, but one guy who's not, and we'll let you lump him in with the receivers here, Kyle Parker. And this is for Hester on the board, who has been begging to have his moment to talk with Charles Power about Kyle Parker, a signee out of signee out of the Texas area, 4-star. Comes in with Jalen Brown. They get him out of Miami, another 4-star, and then Shelton Sampson, obviously here in Baton Rouge. Your thoughts on those guys? Because you had Shelton's a top 100 guy, Jalen Brown's a top 150 guy. And then Kyle Parker is obviously not in the 300. Start with Parker. What are your thoughts on him? Because it seems physically he actually might be the most ready to play, maybe just not long-term the top talent.
Yeah, I think Kyle Parker comes in extremely polished. This is a guy who works really hard at his route running. He's working with trainers, comes from a high school program in Texas, Lucas Lovejoy, that is just really well coached. So I think it's going to be not a tough transition for him at all to LSU. And I think of those three, just from a polish and development standpoint, yeah, he's certainly the most advanced. I like looking at his skill set. I think he is a high volume possession, probably slot receiver, a guy who you can just throw underneath intermediate routes to. Watching him this year, he's really good after the catch. I think he's got some natural tackle breaking ability. He's not going to blow you away from a physical perspective in terms of just like the speed or size necessarily, but highly skilled, tough. I think he'll do dirty work for you and pick up yards after the catch. So with that group, just in general, I think when you look at receiver rooms and receiver classes, you want to have a variety of skills. You don't want a bunch of redundancy. I think at receiver, I think when you're looking at a receiver room, I think one of the best ways you could build it is just to kind of view it like a basketball team, like various guys who can do different roles, because you kind of want that that variety on the field for you. So you look at Jalen Brown. Jalen Brown, I think, is like a Z receiver, like field stretcher, guy who can pull over a safety with his ability to run deep. Jalen Brown is interesting. I think there were probably some questions with him just off his senior year, like the play strength, and just I think he's a guy who probably will really benefit from getting in the weight room at LSU. But he looked like, I think he helped himself a good bit seeing him at the All-American Bowl. He was very good out there. I thought he caught the ball well. His speed translated running against top corners. So he's a guy who might, I would not be surprised if Jalen Brown outplayed his ranking, to be honest. The receiver group is pretty deep this year, and it is a splitting hairs thing when you're stacking all those guys up, kind of with like nationally, especially kind of once you get out, like once you go from 50 to probably 125, 150, it becomes a very tight deal. And, we can't have 30 receivers in the top 100. So you have to kind of tier it out a little bit amongst other positions. I think we had 16 maybe in the top 100, which is probably about the number that you see in an NFL draft. You typically see 15 receivers on average go in the top 100 picks. So that's kind of what we're benchmarking for. But if you told me Jalen Brown was one of those top 15 guys, if not a top 10 guy, I wouldn't be shocked based on what we saw. I think he has that upside. And then Shelton Sampson, I think you would project as like your X receiver. So you have like Parker as a kind of your slot volume guy. Jalen Brown as your X, and then Shelton Sampson Jalen Brown as your Z, and then Shelton Sampson as your X. Shelton was a guy who we had as a 5-star early on. I think he has a lot going for him. He's big, fast, was productive at Catholic this year. And I think he has a lot of potential. Will continue to get better. I think seeing him in person, this is my first time seeing him in person at Under Armour. I think he has a little more development than we thought to go. He's younger for the class, so I think that'll be time. Is he a guy who's going to play early? I'm not sure, but I still think he has a lot of upside. And his strengths are really just, I think the size and speed combo is good. And then he can go up and win at the catch point, which I think if Shelton Sampson hits, it's going to be because he is consistently winning at the catch point. So I think that's going to be the biggest driver in kind of how he shakes out at LSU in long term. If he becomes that guy who is just bodying, defensive backs, boxing guys out in air, and winning in contested situations, and becomes that like go-to target. I think that's the scenario you would hope for if you're an LSU fan with Shelton Sampson.
Yeah, and I completely agree. Pretty much nailed it on all those guys. And I think one guy you talk about the catch point and going up and getting it, Kamorian Pimpton. You bumped him up into the top 100, number 4 tight end in the country. Looked good at the All-America Bowl. I mean, at times didn't get the targets, probably deserved as far as how open he was at times. But, I saw him as a senior in person, and you had a ton of production to go over as you sifted through that senior tape and bumped him up, I think, in the top 150 about halfway through his senior season. What are your expectations for Kamorian Pimpton now that he heads to Baton Rouge this summer?
Yeah, Kamorian Pimpton is one of the biggest risers, I think, over the course of his senior year, really nationally. When you look at like top 100 prospects, there's probably, I don't know, like 10 maybe who were kind of 3-star types or viewed in that light entering the fall. And like I said earlier, like the senior year is for us huge in this. It's just, I think it's on average, the biggest factor in really kind of trying to pinpoint how good a player is going to be long-term. So Pimpton, I think, is an interesting deal where, watching him, he was initially committed to Vanderbilt. Great find by our friend, former colleague, Barton Simmons at Vandy. They identified him as a high upside tight end. I don't think he had a ton of production at his previous school. Do you remember what school he went to, Billy, before he transferred to North Crowley?
I believe it was Brewer,
maybe. Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
4 with Brewer. So didn't have a ton of production. I mean, his measurables are off the charts. I think so. Getting that on him, I think anybody would see his size and arm length. I mean, he's 6'6", 225 with 36-inch arms. I think he's some of the longest arms of any prospect in the cycle. LSU might have signed 2 of the top, I don't know, 5 to 10 longest prospects out of anybody with he and Zalance Hurd. So, I mean, that's a feather in LSU's cap for sure. But so I think his measurables, I think he's a 50+ foot shot put thrower as well. So we had that stuff on him. We didn't have his arm length, but we knew he was a high upside tight end kind of going into the season. Well, and then fast forward, he transfers into North Crowley and just completely goes off, like changed their team. It made I think they were undefeated in the regular season. I'm watching stuff during the fall on like Friday nights, and he is like a complete mismatch in the passing game. I think of all the pass catchers in this cycle, there's conservatively speaking, Pimpton is in the top 2 or 3 largest catch radiuses of anyone that we looked at, receiver or tight end. There's maybe 1 or 2 other guys you can maybe throw into that mix, but his ability to go up and in high point and just the length and just the overall breadth of where he can make catches is like special and pretty unique. So I think he at the minimum is going to be a big time like red zone goal line target, jump ball. He is I would be surprised if he doesn't catch a ton of jump ball touchdowns at LSU. And yeah, I think one of the things that I think will determine his ultimate ceiling, kind of drawing it back to kind of like what I said about Shelton Sampson. I think if Kamorian Pimpton, and he has the chance to be the best tight end in this class. If he is that guy, it's gonna really, I think, come down to just the movement skills and lateral agility as a route runner. That was the one thing that I think, like, how much he improves that at LSU is going to decide if he's like a first rounder. I think the ball skills and his ability to win at the catch point is going to translate like immensely. But how much he can get open within his routes, pick up yards after the catch, and just the movement skills is going to be a big factor. I think seeing him in person, Billy. Like, I mean, I don't know if you agree or not, but I think he's pretty athletic. Like he moves well. I think it's just going to be continuing to work at it, and just become more of a technician. I think that's going to be something with him, and just to bring it back to like LSU, just from a big picture standpoint. I think when you look at this class, you think about what like the positions that Brian Kelly really made hay on at Notre Dame: offensive line, tight end, I think LSU hit home runs at both positions, and that's something that he's brought to LSU. So I think that's big. And when you look at college football now, you look at how Georgia uses their tight ends. I mean, if you can run multiple tight end sets in modern college football, that really kind of gives you a little bit of like a skeleton key with how you can attack defenses. So you talk about putting Pimpton, Jackson McGohan, some of these, Mason Taylor, of course, like some of these guys that LSU has on the field at the same time would be great for their offense. And I also, too, I would add, I think Pimpton has upside as a blocker. He's obviously strong. He's obviously strong and super long. And I think he's got some toughness about him. So once he continues to add weight to his frame, if he's a 250-pound guy, I think he's an inline tight end, which is, I think adds just a complete different dimension to him as an overall, player and prospect. So it'll be really fun to kind of see what he looks like after a year or so in the strength program. And I want to say he's younger for the class as well. So he's got a late July birthday. So this is a guy who won't turn 18.
Super young.
He'll be on campus. I mean, he really could be a 24.
He's kind of got a baby face, so it's not surprising.
Yeah, he's really got a 24. And that's one thing too, just from a overall evaluation standpoint, a trend that I've noticed, I'm probably gonna write a story on this. A trend that I've noticed this year is late birthday guys popping, rising later. That's like senior risers, guys who develop later. Kind of bringing it back to like the early rankings thing. A lot of these guys who pop up on the radar early tend to be a little older, and I think the later birthday younger prospects tend to develop at a later rate. I mean, I think we're talking about 16 to 18-year-olds in physical maturity. So I think the fact that Pimpton still, he's this good and he's 17 years old, had just turned 17 when the season started, it's really kind of scary. I mean, he's got a ton of potential. So I think he was a huge flip for LSU. And he was not y'all can back me up on this, but he was not an ezy flip from Vandy. I mean, he kind of fit the Vanderbilt profile. Like, he's an academic guy. I think that was the fact that LSU could come in and flip him late. I think says a lot about their recruiting efforts, and the evaluation is strong too. LSU was on him early, relatively speaking, to him kind of blowing up as a senior. So I think that was a great job by LSU's whole organization with Kamorian Pimpton.
He used the word sanguine to describe his LSU offer.
Yeah, that's the first time I've ever seen sanguine in any recruiting media.